You still have time to stop, Marcus Reed said. And for the first time that night, Officer Daniel Mercer looked uncertain. Rain whispered across the roof of the black sport utility vehicle while red and blue lights pulsed against the wet shoulder of the Virginia highway. Marcus stood several feet behind his vehicle with both hands visible, his voice calm, his breathing steady, his dark jacket damp at the shoulders. Mercer had expected nervousness, maybe anger, maybe an argument he could point to later and call suspicious. What he got instead was control, and somehow that seemed to bother him more. "Stop what?" Mercer asked. Marcus glanced toward the small light blinking on the officer's body camera. "You know exactly what I mean." Mercer gave a short laugh and turned back toward the open passenger door. To him, the situation was simple. A black man driving an expensive vehicle late at night. Too calm, too precise, too willing to ask why. Mercer had already decided there had to be something more, and every answer Marcus gave was being forced into that conclusion. A second patrol officer, Ethan Cole, stood nearby under the glow of the emergency lights, watching more carefully now. He had arrived only minutes earlier, but even he could feel that something about the stop had shifted. "Daniel," Cole said quietly. "The registration matches him." Mercer did not look up. "That does not mean there is nothing else going on." Marcus heard the words and said nothing. Silence had become useful. It gave Mercer room to reveal himself without interruption. The highway stretched dark in both directions, the nearest exit almost 3 miles away. Passing cars sent thin sprays of water across the pavement before disappearing into the night. Inside Marcus's vehicle, a second phone vibrated once against the center console, then stopped. Mercer noticed it. His attention sharpened. He reached inside and moved a jacket aside, exposing the edge of a sealed folder. "What is this?" he asked. "Work material," Marcus replied. "What kind of work?" Marcus held his gaze. "The kind you should not open without a very good reason." Cole looked at Mercer. Mercer looked back at Marcus. The warning should have slowed him down. Instead, it seemed to harden his determination. He searched the console again and found a plain black leather wallet. Marcus's expression changed, but only slightly. Mercer caught it immediately. "Now that got your attention," he said. Marcus answered in the same measured tone. "Officer Mercer, put that down and reconsider what you are doing." "Why?" "Because every decision you make from this point forward is going to matter." Mercer smiled, convinced Marcus was bluffing. He opened the wallet. The smile vanished. His eyes moved across the identification inside, then stopped. Cole took one step closer. "What is it?" Mercer did not answer. Marcus watched him quietly as the rain softened around them. A few seconds later, the radio on Mercer's shoulder crackled with an unfamiliar urgency. The dispatcher asked him to confirm the identity of the man he had stopped. Mercer looked at Marcus again, but this time there was no suspicion in his face. There was calculation. There was doubt. And somewhere beyond that lonely highway, calls were already moving through a chain of command Mercer did not know existed, toward people in Washington who were about to ask one simple question. Why had this stop gone this far? 8 minutes earlier, none of it had looked important. Marcus Reed was simply another driver moving north through Virginia under a steady evening rain, the windshield wipers sweeping back and forth while the glow of distant gas stations flickered beyond the trees. He had spent most of the day in Richmond and was finally heading home, tired enough to enjoy the quiet but alert enough to notice everything around him. His personal phone rested beside a paper coffee cup in the center console. A second phone, reserved for work, sat face down near a sealed folder on the passenger seat. Beneath that folder was a dark jacket, and inside the console was the black leather wallet he rarely touched unless his work required it. Marcus had no reason to think about any of those things. At that moment, he was thinking about whether he had remembered to buy milk and whether his mother would call again before he reached home. Then red and blue lights appeared in the rearview mirror. Marcus checked his speed. He had been traveling 61 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour zone after coming down a long grade. He signaled, slowed carefully, and pulled onto the shoulder beneath a streetlight. Before the patrol officer reached his door, Marcus lowered the window and placed both hands on the steering wheel. Officer Daniel Mercer approached with a flashlight angled toward the cabin. "License and registration," he said. Marcus nodded. "My license is in my wallet. The registration is in the glove compartment. May I reach for them?" Mercer studied him for a moment. Slowly, Marcus followed the instruction exactly. The license was valid. The registration matched his name. The vehicle identification information matched the sport utility vehicle. Everything should have made the stop simpler. Instead, Mercer remained beside the window. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "Richmond." "Where are you headed?" "Home." Mercer glanced toward the back seat, then toward the sealed folder in front. "Where is home?" Marcus gave him the town. Mercer looked down at the registration again. "This vehicle belongs to you?" Marcus paused. "Yes. The registration is in my name." Mercer did not move. "What were you doing in Richmond?" Marcus looked at him. "Working." "What kind of work?" The question was delivered differently from the others. Not casually. Not as part of a routine traffic stop. Marcus recognized the change immediately. It was the moment when curiosity became suspicion and suspicion began searching for something to justify itself. "Officer, may I ask why that is relevant to the traffic violation?" Mercer's expression tightened. "I am asking the questions." Marcus kept his voice even. "And I am answering them." Rain tapped softly against the roof. A car passed in the left lane and disappeared into the darkness. Mercer looked at Marcus again, this time longer. "You seem nervous." Marcus almost smiled. "I am sitting still with both hands visible." Mercer ignored the answer. His flashlight moved across the passenger seat, the jacket, the folder, then back to Marcus. "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus did not argue. He simply asked one question before reaching for the door. "For what reason?" Mercer's jaw tightened. "Because I told you to." That was the moment Marcus understood the stop was no longer about 6 miles per hour. Something else had taken control of the conversation. Something Mercer had decided before he had any evidence to support it. Marcus opened the door slowly and stepped onto the wet shoulder, still unaware that within minutes, the officer standing beside him would open a black leather wallet and discover just how much his assumptions had already cost him. Marcus stepped onto the shoulder and closed the door behind him with deliberate care. The rain had softened, but the pavement still reflected every pulse of red and blue from Mercer's patrol car. "Stand near the rear of the vehicle," Mercer said. Marcus moved where he was directed, keeping his hands visible. "Are you carrying anything I should know about?" "Nothing illegal." Mercer narrowed his eyes. "That was not what I asked." Marcus looked at him. "Then ask me exactly what you want to know." The answer was calm, but Mercer reacted as though calm itself were a challenge. He glanced toward the open road, then back at Marcus. "You people always think you can talk your way around a simple question." Marcus heard the phrase and felt the temperature of the stop change again. It was no longer subtle. No longer something that could be explained away as poor communication. He said nothing for a moment. The silence forced Mercer to live with his own words. "Officer," Marcus said finally, "your camera is recording, correct?" Mercer's eyes flicked toward the small light on his body camera. "Why are you worried about my camera?" "I am not worried about it." Marcus kept his voice steady. "I want it on." Mercer stared at him for a second, then reached for his radio. "Dispatch, send me another unit." Marcus turned his eyes toward the highway. The nearest exit was almost 3 miles away, and the rain made the surrounding darkness feel even deeper. He could have ended the uncertainty in seconds. A few words, a credential, a title, but he did not believe basic fairness should depend on the job someone happened to hold. He had answered the questions. The registration matched. The license matched. There had been no threat, no contradiction, no reason for the stop to keep expanding. Yet Mercer continued building a story that the facts did not support. A few minutes later, another patrol car pulled onto the shoulder. Officer Ethan Cole stepped out and approached with a cautious expression. He was younger than Mercer and immediately looked from Marcus to the sport utility vehicle. "What do we have?" Cole asked. Mercer lowered his voice, but Marcus could still hear enough. "Possible suspicious activity. Evasive answers. Something feels off." Cole glanced at the registration in Mercer's hand. "The vehicle comes back to him?" "Yes," Mercer said. "But that is not the point." Cole looked at Marcus again. "Sir, is there anything in the vehicle that creates a safety concern?" "No." "Any weapons?" "No." "Anything illegal?" "No." Cole nodded slowly. Mercer did not seem satisfied. "He has been questioning every instruction," he said. Marcus turned toward them. "I have complied with every lawful instruction you have given me." Mercer's expression hardened. "See what I mean?" Cole did not answer. That hesitation was small, almost invisible, but Marcus noticed it. For the first time, there was someone else at the roadside who was not automatically accepting Mercer's interpretation. Mercer walked toward the passenger side and shined his flashlight through the glass. The beam passed over the jacket, the sealed folder, the second phone. His attention stopped there. 2 phones, he said. That unusual for you? One is for work. Mercer gave Cole a look. And the folder? Also work. Open the vehicle. Marcus held his gaze. What is your legal basis for searching it? Mercer took a breath, clearly irritated. Your behavior, the second phone, the fact that you will not explain what you are doing out here. Marcus looked at the body camera again. Then let the recording show that those are your reasons. Cole's eyes shifted toward Mercer. The rain continued falling softly around them. Marcus remained still. Mercer remained determined. And somewhere inside that vehicle sat 3 ordinary objects that were about to turn Mercer's assumptions into a record he could no longer control. Mercer kept his eyes on Marcus for another second, then turned toward the passenger door as if the question about legal basis had only made him more determined to prove himself right. Stay where you are, he said. Marcus did not move. Ethan Cole remained a few feet away, watching Mercer more closely now than he was watching the man who had been stopped. Mercer opened the passenger door and leaned inside. The rain ticked softly against the roof while the flashlight beam moved across the seat, the floorboard, the sealed folder, and the second phone. You said this is for work? Mercer asked. Yes. What kind of work requires 2 phones? Marcus answered without hesitation. The kind where one is personal and one is not. Mercer looked back at him with a faint, skeptical smile. That sounds convenient. Marcus did not respond. Cole shifted his stance. Daniel, the registration is clean. The license is clean. He answered the safety questions. Mercer straightened. And he is still being evasive. About his job, Cole said. Not about the vehicle. Mercer ignored him and reached toward the sealed folder. Marcus's voice changed just enough to stop him. Do not open that. Mercer froze. Why? Because you do not know what it contains, and you have not established a reason to access it. Mercer turned fully toward him. You do not get to decide what I can look at during an investigation. Marcus held his gaze. Then explained the investigation. For a moment, neither man spoke. The highway hummed in the distance. Water gathered along the edge of the shoulder and ran in thin streams toward the drainage ditch. Mercer seemed to search for an answer that sounded stronger than the one he had already given. You were stopped for speeding. You questioned basic instructions. You have 2 phones. You have sealed documents you refuse to explain. That gives me reason to continue looking into what is going on. Marcus nodded once. Then say that clearly for the camera. Mercer glanced down at the body camera again. It was a tiny movement, but Cole noticed it. So did Marcus. The camera had become the one presence on the roadside Mercer could not intimidate, persuade, or rewrite later. Marcus, Cole said carefully, using his name for the first time, is there anything in the vehicle that belongs to a government agency? Marcus looked at him. There are work materials in the vehicle. Cole's expression sharpened. Daniel, maybe we should pause until we know exactly what we are dealing with. Mercer shook his head. We are not calling Washington every time someone carries a folder. The sentence landed strangely. Marcus almost found it ironic, though his face remained controlled. Mercer searched the center console instead. His hand moved past charging cables, receipts, and a pair of sunglasses before closing around the black leather wallet. Marcus's attention fixed on it immediately. Mercer saw that reaction. This seems important, he said. It is, Marcus replied. Then maybe you should have mentioned it. You never asked whether I carried professional credentials. Mercer held the wallet up. Professional credentials for what? Marcus drew a slow breath. Officer Mercer, you have had several opportunities to bring this stop back to what actually happened on the road. Mercer gave a short laugh. You still think you are in control here? Marcus looked at the body camera, then at Cole, then back at Mercer. No, I think the record is. Cole lowered his eyes for a second. Mercer did not. He opened the wallet, and whatever confidence had been holding his expression together disappeared almost at once. Mercer stared at the identification inside the black leather wallet, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something easier to accept. They did not. Marcus Reed, Supervisory Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The badge beside the identification caught the flashing light from the patrol car and reflected it back across Mercer's face. Ethan Cole stepped closer, his expression changing the moment he saw what Mercer was holding. Daniel, Cole said quietly, give that back to him. Mercer did not move. Being federal does not make him immune from a traffic stop. Marcus answered before Cole could. I never said it. Did? Mercer looked up. Marcus's tone was still calm, but the balance of the roadside had changed. Then why did you not identify yourself? Mercer asked. Marcus glanced toward the body camera. Because my job should not have been necessary for you to handle the stop fairly. Cole lowered his eyes for a moment. Mercer closed the wallet but kept it in his hand. You were speeding. 6 miles per hour over the limit, Marcus said. I acknowledged that. Everything after that was your decision. Mercer's jaw tightened. You were evasive. About where I work. Not about my identity, ownership of the vehicle, or anything related to the reason you stopped me. The second work phone inside the sport utility vehicle began vibrating again. Once. Then again. Mercer looked toward the sound. Marcus did not. He knew exactly why it was happening. Before leaving Richmond, he had been required to complete a secure check-in tied to the federal material he was transporting. The sealed folder on the passenger seat was not ordinary paperwork. It contained protected case documents connected to an active civil rights and public integrity review. Marcus had been expected to confirm arrival at a designated point before continuing home. That confirmation had never happened. His work phone had gone unanswered. The missed check-in had triggered an internal call. The unanswered call had triggered another. Now people were trying to determine why a federal agent carrying protected material had suddenly stopped responding on a Virginia highway. Cole looked at Marcus. Is that phone part of your work? Yes. Are they expecting you to answer? Yes. Mercer turned toward him. Who is calling? Marcus held his gaze. People who are going to want to know why I missed a secure check-in. Mercer's expression shifted again. Not fear. Calculation. For the first time, the consequences in front of him were becoming larger than embarrassment. The radio on his shoulder crackled. Unit 12, stand by for priority traffic regarding your current stop. Mercer reached for it. Unit 12, go ahead. Static filled the air for a second. Confirm the detained driver's full name. Mercer looked at Marcus. Then at the wallet. Marcus read. Another pause. Longer than the first. Confirm whether the vehicle has been searched. Mercer did not answer immediately. Cole looked at him. Marcus watched without speaking. Affirmative, Mercer finally said. The dispatcher's voice returned, more deliberate now. Maintain the scene. Conduct no further search. Your supervisor has been notified. Federal Bureau of Investigation contact has confirmed Special Agent Reed's identity. Mercer's hand dropped slightly from the radio. Cole exhaled. Marcus remained still. Then came one final transmission. Additional instructions are being coordinated through Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters in Washington. Mercer stared into the darkness beyond the highway as if the road itself had changed. Marcus did not smile. He did not need to. The badge had revealed who he was. The radio was about to reveal how far Mercer's decisions had traveled. For several seconds, no one spoke. The rain had thinned to a mist, but the lights from both patrol cars still painted the roadside in restless color. Mercer held the radio near his shoulder, listening as though another transmission might somehow undo the last one. It did not. Unit 12, your supervisor is en route, the dispatcher said. Preserve all recordings and remain available for further instruction. Mercer looked at Marcus. What exactly were you doing in Richmond? Marcus did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the sealed folder inside the vehicle, then back at the officer. I was working on a federal review involving civil rights complaints and public integrity concerns. Ethan Cole's expression changed. In this area? Marcus looked at him. Some of the records involve this region. Mercer gave a short, defensive laugh. So now this stop is part of some investigation? It was not when you pulled me over, Marcus said. What happened after that is a different question. The words settled over the roadside with more force than anger could have carried. Mercer looked toward the body camera on his chest. For the first time, he seemed fully aware of it. Marcus continued. You had a valid license. You had valid registration. You had a traffic violation you could document. Everything beyond that was a choice. Mercer shook his head. You were withholding information. My employer was not relevant to whether I owned the vehicle. You had 2 phones. Millions of Americans have 2 phones. Cole looked away, almost hiding a reaction. Mercer's frustration sharpened. You had sealed federal documents. You did not know they were federal documents when you decided they made me suspicious. That ended the argument. Mercer had no answer because Marcus had identified the problem exactly. The justification kept changing after each new fact appeared. First it was the expensive vehicle, then the questions, then the second phone, then the folder. Each detail had been treated as suspicious only because Mercer had already decided Marcus required suspicion. In the distance, another set of headlights appeared and slowed toward the shoulder. Cole watched them approach. "Supervisor," he said. A patrol vehicle stopped behind the others, and Lieutenant Samuel Brooks stepped out. He walked toward them with the controlled urgency of someone who had already been briefed. "Officer Mercer," he said, "step away from the passenger side." Mercer complied. Brooks turned immediately to Marcus. "Special Agent Reed, are you safe?" "Yes." "Has your property been returned?" Marcus looked at the black wallet still in Mercer's hand. Brooks followed his eyes. "Officer Mercer." Mercer handed it over without speaking. Marcus checked the credentials, closed the wallet, and placed it inside his jacket. Brooks turned to Cole. "Both body cameras active?" "Yes, sir." "Dashboard cameras?" "Active." Brooks nodded. "Nothing gets deleted, edited, transferred, or overwritten. Preserve the dispatch audio and the full stop timeline." Mercer frowned. "Lieutenant, I can explain what happened." Brooks looked at him calmly. "Then the recording will support your explanation." The sentence left Mercer silent. Brooks's phone began ringing. He checked the screen, then looked at Marcus. "Federal Bureau of Investigation Headquarters." Mercer's eyes lifted. Brooks answered, listened briefly, then handed the phone to Marcus. "They want a direct status update." Marcus took it. "Read." A senior official's voice came through, calm and precise. "Marcus, confirm your condition and the status of the protected material." "I am fine. The material is secure." "Understood. Do not discuss the review further at roadside." Evidence preservation has been. Lieutenant Samuel Brooks kept the roadside frozen exactly as it was while the chain of command widened beyond Mercer's control. Marcus stood beside his vehicle with the black leather wallet secured inside his jacket, his breathing steady, his attention no longer on the officer who had stopped him but on the record that now surrounded them. The body cameras were still running. The dashboard cameras were still running. Dispatch had preserved the radio traffic. The sealed folder remained untouched. Nothing needed to be dramatic anymore, because the facts had already become more powerful than the confrontation. Brooks stepped toward Mercer. "Walk me through the stop from the beginning." Mercer looked at Marcus, then at Cole. "I observed a speeding violation." "How fast?" Brooks asked. 61 in a 55. "Then what happened?" Mercer hesitated. "He was evasive." Brooks looked toward Cole. "Evasive about what?" Cole answered carefully. "His employment." Mercer turned toward him. He questioned instructions. Cole did not back away from the statement, but he did not support Mercer's version either. He asked why certain questions were relevant. Brooks nodded slowly. "And the search?" Silence followed. Mercer's eyes moved toward the cameras again. "I believe there were indicators that justified further investigation." "Which indicators?" Brooks asked. Mercer listed them now. The second phone. The sealed folder. Marcus declining to explain his occupation. Brooks listened without interruption. Marcus did the same. When Mercer finished, Brooks asked one more question. "Did any of those things exist before you decided he was acting suspiciously?" Mercer stared at him. The question was simple, but it exposed the sequence. Marcus had noticed it earlier. Cole had begun noticing it too. Mercer had formed a conclusion first, then collected ordinary details afterward and treated them as proof. Brooks turned toward Marcus. "Special Agent Reed, I need your account for the incident record." Marcus nodded. He described the stop without exaggeration. 6 miles per hour over the limit. License produced. Registration produced. Vehicle ownership confirmed. Questions about Richmond. Questions about his job. The order to exit. The second unit. The search. The credentials. He did not call Mercer names. He did not assign motives he could not prove. He simply described what happened and allowed the sequence to speak for itself. Cole listened closely. Something about that restraint seemed to make him more uncomfortable than anger would have. When Marcus finished, Brooks looked at Cole. "Anything you need to add?" Cole took a breath. "Yes, sir." Mercer turned toward him. Cole kept his eyes on Brooks. "When I arrived, the vehicle registration had already been confirmed. I did not observe a safety threat. I heard Special Agent Reed ask for the legal basis of the search. I also heard him ask that the body camera remain on." Mercer's expression hardened. "Ethan, be careful." Brooks immediately looked at him. "Officer Mercer, Do not coach a witness. The words were calm, but final. Cole swallowed and continued. There is something else. Marcus watched him. I have seen similar stops before. The roadside seemed to become silent again. Brooks's expression changed. Similar how? Cole looked at Mercer, then away. Stops where the reason started small, but the questions kept expanding after the driver had already provided valid documents. Mercer shook his head. That is not what happened tonight. Cole finally looked directly at him. Then the footage will show that. It was the same principle Brooks had stated earlier, now repeated by the younger officer Mercer had expected to stand beside him. Marcus said nothing. He understood what had just happened. Washington had not created the problem. His federal badge had not created the problem. They had simply forced everyone present to stop looking away from it. And as Brooks requested the incident numbers of the earlier stops Cole remembered, Daniel Mercer realized that the traffic stop was ending, but the questions were only beginning. By the time the patrol cars left the highway, the rain had stopped, but the questions raised on that roadside were already moving through offices, databases, and archived reports. Lieutenant Samuel Brooks ordered the full traffic stop preserved before anyone went home. Body camera footage was secured. Dashboard video was copied. Dispatch audio was locked. The timeline was documented minute by minute. Marcus Reed left only after confirming that the sealed federal material was intact and that the incident had been formally recorded. He did not ask for Daniel Mercer to be punished. He asked for the evidence to remain untouched. The next morning, Ethan Cole sat in a small conference room at department headquarters with an investigator across from him and a legal pad between them. He was asked to describe the earlier stops he had mentioned. Cole started with one. A black college professor stopped for a minor lane issue. Valid license. Valid registration. Questions that kept expanding anyway. Then another. A black business owner driving home after closing his restaurant. The original reason had been a broken license plate light, but the stop had stretched into questions about ownership, income, and why he was in the neighborhood. Cole did not claim every stop was unlawful. He did not need to. He provided dates, approximate locations, and incident numbers where he could remember them. Investigators did the rest. Records were pulled. Complaints were reopened. Video was reviewed. What had once existed as separate incidents began to look different when placed side by side. The same phrases appeared. The same assumptions. The same pattern of ordinary details being treated as suspicious only after Mercer had already decided something was wrong. By that afternoon, Marcus received a secure call from a senior official at Federal Bureau of Investigation headquarters. The local department is cooperating, the official said. Several prior complaints match concerns already present in the regional review. Marcus stood near the window of a federal office, watching traffic move through the city below. So last night did not create the pattern, he said. No, came the reply. It gave us another documented example. Marcus looked down at the black leather wallet resting on his desk. That distinction mattered. If the entire story became about an officer mistreating the wrong man, then the real lesson would be lost. Marcus had credentials. He understood procedure. He had supervisors who answered when he missed a secure check-in. Most people did not. Within days, Mercer was placed on administrative leave while the department conducted an internal review. Federal civil rights attorneys requested selected records. Supervisors were asked why earlier complaints had been closed without deeper examination. Cole gave a complete statement. Then another officer came forward. Then another. No single statement decided the outcome. The strength came from consistency. Dates, recordings, reports, repeated choices. Marcus was asked by a colleague whether he felt vindicated. He thought about it before answering. Vindicated would mean the system worked before it knew my job title. The colleague remained silent. Marcus closed the wallet and placed it inside a drawer. The badge had changed Mercer's behavior in seconds, but it had not changed the facts that came before it. That was why the investigation mattered. Accountability could not depend on whether the person standing beside the road had enough power to make someone listen. 3 weeks later, Marcus Reed returned to the same stretch of Virginia highway in daylight. The rain was gone, the pavement was dry, and the road looked almost ordinary again. Cars moved past at a steady pace, people heading to work, picking up groceries, visiting family, living lives that should never require a title or a badge to earn basic respect. Marcus pulled onto the shoulder near the same streetlight and sat quietly for a moment with both hands resting on the steering wheel. The place seemed smaller than he remembered. No flashing lights. No radio traffic. No questions. Just a narrow strip of asphalt and the memory of how quickly one routine stop had exposed something much larger. The investigation was still active. Daniel Mercer remained off patrol while internal affairs reviewed the evidence, and federal officials examined the complaints that had surfaced after Ethan Cole spoke up. Several older cases had been reopened. Supervisors were being asked why patterns had been missed and why concerns had been treated as isolated events. Cole had provided a full statement. Other officers had followed. Nothing about the process looked dramatic from the outside. It was interviews, timestamps, reports, recordings, and people finally deciding that silence was also a choice. Marcus stepped out of the vehicle and looked down the highway. A senior official in Washington had asked him the week before whether he regretted not identifying himself immediately. He had thought about that question more than once. If he had shown his Federal Bureau of Investigation credentials in the first minute, Mercer probably would have changed his tone. The questions might have ended. The search might never have happened. The entire night might have become a forgotten traffic warning. But that possibility was exactly what troubled Marcus. Fair treatment that appears only after power is revealed is not fairness. Respect that depends on rank is not respect. A person should not have to be a federal agent, a judge, a police chief, or anyone important to be treated with dignity during a traffic stop. Marcus remembered Mercer asking why he had not simply said who he was. The answer seemed clearer now. His profession had never been the point. The real question was whether Mercer could recognize another person's humanity before learning that person had institutional power. Marcus returned to the sport utility vehicle and placed the black leather wallet in the center console. For years, the badge inside had represented duty, responsibility, and the weight of federal law. That night, it had revealed something else. It had shown how quickly one man's assumptions could change when authority entered the conversation. Marcus started the engine and looked once more at the empty shoulder. He did not feel victorious. He felt certain. The most important outcome would not be what happened to Mercer, but whether the people reviewing the case were willing to change what had. Allowed the pattern to continue. Marcus signaled and pulled back onto the highway. The road opened ahead of him, bright beneath the morning sky. Justice does not begin when power recognizes power. Justice begins when people recognize people.